Hey guys, welcome back to the Composition Madhouse, where imitation is mastery, brought to you by Foster Light Studios. My name is John, and in this week, we're looking at a technique called shadow exposure. Hey guys, welcome back. A few videos ago, when we were talking about the 9 ways to simplify your composition, we looked at one called luminance exposure. And in this week, we're going to look at the opposite technique of that. It's really fascinating. I just recently stumbled on it, and I'm very excited about it. So, the original technique, luminance exposure, you are exploiting a feature of your camera, and that is that your camera has a smaller dynamic range than your eye. That is, you can see more things in bright highlights and into shadows at the same time where your camera can't. And with luminance exposure, basically what you do is you put your subject into a bright highlight, you expose for that highlight, and then the background will go very dark, if not black, and it's a great way to simplify your compositions. Well, here's an example of one way that I did this. I was shooting this wedding in Florida, and I wanted to shoot the shoes of the bride, and so I was going around looking for a good place to shoot them, and I came into this room, which at first glance just looks pretty lackluster, but I did see that there was this bright highlight on the floor here from this window. And so what I did was I took the shoes and put them right up here. Then I got on the ground here and shot this way, and this image came out. So it's the same thing, but I'm just on the floor, and because I was exposing for these highlights here, everything else went black. Well, that's the luminance exposure technique, where you have your subject, which is in the highlight, which you expose for, and your background, which is your shadow, which goes off into darkness. Well, you can reverse that and put your subject in the shadow or midtones and have the background as your highlight, and then the highlight will blow out or be close to blown out, and thus will be a simpler composition. So this occurred to me when I was with my family at a forest preserve, and I was walking through this field right here, and there was some grass that you see over here, and right in the middle of this grass behind my wife here was the shadow of a mid-sized tree. So it was probably 2.5 feet across, and it was just this one beam of dark shadow that was going across here. And I was thinking about this luminance exposure, and I thought, well, what if I do this the opposite way? So I had my wife stand in the shadow right here, and then this highlight area, so this is what it would look like to the naked eye if you were there. And this is what it would look like if you were exposing for these things over here that were in the hard sunlight. And so I had her stand in here and then exposed for her skin, and then got this image right here. It's just beautiful because it's this, it's very different and airy. It's a technique for simplifying because you can take away a lot of the things that might be distracting in your image, and it's a very cool technique to do. Now, when you're thinking about doing this, there's a few considerations you have to have. One is that there has to be a high dynamic range in the image, so there has to be hard sunlight and shadow. And that's criterion 1. Criterion 2 is that you want to find someplace with very distinct shapes of shadows. So You can use this with tree trunks is great, or light poles, or anything that's of the same shadow where the sun is kind of hitting at a 45-degree angle, so it's casting a decent sized shadow. And what happens is that when you put your subject in here, they can block a lot of the shadow behind. And the other way you can do this is if you have a building that is casting a very sort of angular shadow, and so you can put your subject in that dark shadow and shoot and throw them off to one side or the other in the frame, and have all the rest of it be the highlight area that will go off into clipped highlights or close to clipped highlights, so it's nice and white and simple. So that's the technique for this week. Thanks so much for tuning in. Like and subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you next week. Thanks so much.